Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Welcome in. Guerrilla Sports Off Ice. Postgame live edition after game 5. The Avs dropped this one 6-2. I'm Jesse Montano. She's Meghan Angley. Meghan, that was a roller coaster of a game and did not have a fun ending for the Colorado Avalanche.
No, it was a difficult watch. It felt like the script was flipped from game 4 for Dallas, but it also feels like the context of game 5 was so different from the context of game 4, and the ways in which the Avs lose game 5 does still feel very different in nature, and it made it all the more a frustrating watch in the end.
Yeah, this game was off to a weird start from the very jump. And I guess there's no need to beat around the bush here, Meghan. Let's just jump right into it. 9 seconds into this game, Wyatt Johnston, the puck is flipped up and in. And I can tell you, I lost that puck immediately. I thought for sure it hit the netting. A bunch of the players even kind of stood up, and I laughed to myself because I thought, oh, man, there's a funny, quirky start to this game. Puck is dropped, and then play is immediately stopped. Wyatt Johnston, I don't know if he kept his eye on it the whole time or if he just found it, but 9 seconds in, he forces one to go from a weird angle. And while I felt the Avs responded okay, Meghan, I just felt like that set the tone in such a weird way.
So I actually feel like that's not where the tone shifted. I still felt a sense of confidence that the Avs could weather a weird goal. And I felt some of what they did immediately following that goal in terms of how they tried to create chances was encouraging. It also felt like their decisions with the puck were a little less responsible compared to game 4. But ultimately, I liked what they were doing in terms of how they tried to create offense immediately following it. And so it felt like a storm that they could weather, fully recognizing that it was weird. And even just big picture view of the first period for a second, analytically, it supports that the Avs still had a strong grasp on this game coming out of the first period. So that's not where I felt the mentality shift around the Avs and then begin to get discouraged. But it was certainly weird. But going back to what we talked about with our pregame and Pete DeBoer talking about it being money time and the big players needing to step up for Dallas, Wyatt Johnston being the player to get his first goal of the series 9 seconds into this one, did feel like the NHL scriptwriters were trying to make this a thrilling series. Yeah. And I really hate the way this game plays out because it doesn't feel like it honors the excitement that hockey should be. It feels like we actually lost the plot a little bit in the way that hockey should be played. But at least for the first period, hockey is still being played. You know, Netches had the puck from the low circle and put it on net, and McKinnon chased a rebound, making Ottinger make a save, and Landeskog had this play to Nelson between the hash marks and a blocker save from Ottinger. Like, they were putting pucks on him early, and they go on the PK, which is where they're already not following the game plan that we had set forth for them. But I thought Blackwood was great on the penalty kill, and that's where I thought even Blackwood wasn't really shaken off his game, despite the early goal from Johnston.
Yeah, and no, just to be clear, I agree with you. I didn't think that first goal, you know, I was worried that, because Jared Bednar talked to us about it early in this series, saying, hey, you know, fast starts can sometimes really benefit this Stars team, especially in this building. And I felt like the Avs, I'm with you. I was actually even impressed by how much they seemed relatively unfazed. Again, not that they were playing perfect, but I'm with you. I appreciated the way that they were able to kind of get up and go. They didn't seem like that first goal against bothered them. I just thought it look, I've talked about it for years. If you followed me, if you've watched, you know, our shows, and Megan, I don't know if there's something in the water when these two teams get together. I don't know if, you're an astrology person. I don't know if anytime the Avs and the Stars play, something weird starts going on. Weird things happen in these games, in these playoff series, and I just, like, that puck went in. Not only does everybody on the ice lose sight of it except for Wyatt Johnston, it then beats Mackenzie Blackwood in a really weird way, and I just kind of sat back in my chair like, oh, man, here we go again with the bizarre Avs Stars kind of saga. But I felt like the Avs responded well, and it even felt like, to your point, they were pushing the pace. And then in the last minute of that first period, it's another just weird, quirky bounce that goes up, hits Mackenzie Blackwood in the back, and falls in. And that, to me, was where it felt a little disheartening, because suddenly you give up this early goal, but you push back in a decent way. And it's like, okay, you're going to escape this down 1-0. That 9-second in goal against doesn't end up hurting you. And then, like you said, one of your keys of the game was discipline. Power play goal against to end the period. Was that a power play goal, or was that just a weird fluky one? Am I losing my mind?
That was just a weird fluky one.
Yep, you're right.
But it came after a failed Avs power play attempt.
That's correct. Yes,
and
there we go.
Did make it feel kind of bad, to be honest with you. And it was, it was a couple minutes after. The fourth line had some good shifts in between this happening, so I won't pin it on a failed power play specifically, but rather you see the significance of the failed power play when Dallas does get that late goal. This could have been a very different score going into the second period if they had capitalized on that opportunity. And here's where I'll speak out of both sides of my mouth for a second, because they capitalized on the power play in Game 4, and I'm pretty critical of it still. I didn't feel like process-wise it was very good. I think there were some good things in this power play, but ultimately me sitting here and talking about some of the things that I liked that ultimately didn't lead to a goal for maybe isn't very worthwhile to a lot of people. So there were some improvements from 4 to 5 in this first power play. I thought that Makar used his speed on entry to beat Steele and apply pressure along the wall, and opted to simply take a shot. And so I was seeing a little bit more willingness on behalf of how they were trying to create in different ways. There was a play where McKinnon and Netchus were doing the rover thing, McKinnon being the rover, to create a different opportunity from more so below the goal line from McKinnon to Netchus. So there were some things that I like, but the bottom line is they don't capitalize on it. And then they find themselves in a weird place late in this first period with a Thomas Harley goal. And honestly, what I don't like about this goal, it is ultimately weird, but it does start with a failed exit. Jonathan Truin tries to run through Jamie Benn, and he gets tangled up, and Brock Nelson tries to come in as relief, but Thomas Harley is stronger and gets that puck angled up to Wyatt Johnston to feed Thomas Harley for a shot from the slot. And that's where it gets weird. That shot, it hits Mackenzie Blackwood in the chest, and you see Mackenzie Blackwood track it up into the air. And so he's moving backwards in anticipation that it's going to fall somewhere, but he's not expecting the timing to be just perfect to get behind his back before he can fully seal the crossbar. And that is just so weird.
Well, and not only that, but like I was watching the replay on it, and honestly, Megan, even if he was able to get that sealed or get back in the net, that puck was falling at such a weird angle. Like that puck was destined for chaos. The second it hit him and popped up. But again, you Megan, I'm glad you point that out, because we talked in the first game about earning your bounces and things like that. And it's those small details that I think are where those bounces are earned. And for Dallas on that play, like you said, there's small things that the Avs don't do right. We're going to talk about Drouin. Megan, I'm really struggling with Marty Netchus in this series. We're going to talk about him as well at some point. But yeah, it's small little things, and the Stars get the break. But I was thinking the same thing that you were just talking about there. I said, all right. Power play near the end of this first period for the Avs. You can capitalize here, and suddenly you erase the bad start, and you're right back in it. You're in a tie game, and you're able to go into the intermission even with a little bit of momentum. I actually felt all day, Megan, like the Avs were going to win this game, but that they were going to have to do it in comeback fashion. So when they fell behind, I was like, all right, well, here you go. You got to prove that you can fight back out of a hole here against this team. And then that second goal, just, man, it felt like such a gut punch. And then you come out in the second, and it's Mikko Rantanen finally having an impact on this series. He really has been kind of invisible through the first 4 games. He does end up with the game winner tonight, but he makes it 3-0. And you know, Megan, even still, because of the weird stuff that we've seen between these two teams, I still didn't feel like you were completely out of it. You know, I'm looking at the clock saying, all right, you're down 3-0 with essentially the entire second and third to go here. You got to just start chipping away. And I actually thought the Avs started playing a little bit better after that Mikko goal.
Yeah. Well, they get, a Lehkonen goal to help shore up a little bit of the deficit, about 10 minutes later. And the Mikko Rantanen goal is one of those unfortunate plays that is an odd man rush born from a broken play in the offensive zone. And those are just a little bit weird. So I think that was still where they could reconcile where they were at in this game without getting too in their heads. And that's where it gets tough, is for a good amount of this game. I felt the Avs were resilient in their response to tough moments, to include this Mikko Rantanen goal early into the second period. To your point, I felt that they continued to show consistency in at least trying to create. And so I talked about wanting them to play relentless hockey. That was true for some of this game, at least through this point. And so it leads to them getting on the board with the Artturi Lehkonen goal. It was a great play from below the left circle, McKinnon to Netchus, and the one-timer with a redirect from Lehkonen's stick plate at the crease just kind of rewards why it's important to have a player like Lehkonen establish net front presence and why it's important to operate quickly. And so it's all those things we've been talking about the Avs needing to do to create offense. It's going to be difficult for Dallas to manage and for Ottinger to see, and that's sort of proof of concept.
Yeah, so Lehkonen gets the goal, and you even felt it a little bit, Megan, just like in the flow of the game, that the Avs, okay, you got one. You cut the deficit to 2 before the end of the second period. Suddenly, this is very manageable. And then I do want to point out here really fast, right before Nathan McKinnon scored, Cale Makar had a great opportunity down the slot. Boy, oh boy, has Jake Ottinger had Cale Makar's number in this series so far, Megan.
Yeah, I have 14-11 Cale Makar snapshot glove down, 14-38 Nathan McKinnon goal. And it's true, you go through my notes a little bit more here, and Ottinger has certainly familiarized himself with the way that Cale Makar will try to score. And unfortunately, that has denied Cale Makar a lot of opportunities, which is going to be a part of our conversation at some point when we talk about contributions from Dallas' side, Colorado's side, where both teams are getting enough and not enough from some of the players that you expect. And Cale Makar came out of this night looking a little rough in the series on the whole for his lack of contributions, because obviously this was a night where he was needed most.
Yeah. Credit to Jake Ottinger and the Stars. They've clearly deployed a game plan that is focused on limiting what Cale Makar is able to do. But like you said, it's not much longer later in terms of game time that Nathan McKinnon walks right down Main Street and rips one by Jake Ottinger. And suddenly with 5 minutes and 22 seconds to go in the second period, the Avs found themselves within one, Megan, and you're sitting here saying, all right, we got a game here. Not only do we have a game here, the Avs even have time left to work with in the middle frame. They can still generate some momentum, and suddenly you've got the entire third period just trying to get one goal, and then the penalties start. I want to get your opinion on it. I've got my thoughts on the way that some of these calls were made down the stretch from here, but before we get into that, we got about 15 seconds from Gabe Landeskog. Let's let him talk about it first. Those are maybe kind of tweener calls there.
Those are a couple of those are preseason calls, I think. But, But regardless, we've got to fight through it and keep playing, and we weren't able to get the kill, unfortunately.
Preseason calls. Megan, the officiating in this series, you and I have talked about it after multiple games on regular pods, not in one way or the other. This has been a weirdly officiated series. There's stuff that they're letting players get away with behind the play, in the middle of the play, after whistles. And then again, a really kind of questionable call for me puts Dallas back on the power play. And there's a really frustrating moment on this power play for the Avs from what I was watching. Devon Taves breaks his stick, so he needs a stick down low. Yoel Kiviranta hands his stick off to Taves. Kivi plays out high, doesn't have a stick. The Avs are in a decent spot. You can see Kiviranta motion to Charlie Coyle. There's a guy behind you. Keep an eye on the guy behind you. It's Wyatt Johnston. Nobody covers him. He's wide open, 4-2, and that really felt like the game to me.
Yeah. I wanted to just say one quick thing about the Nathan MacKinnon goal before we started talking about the officiating from this point, but it was to talk about the formula of success for the Avs and how they create. The MacKinnon goal starts with Taves enduring a puck battle along the boards to feed MacKinnon, and MacKinnon has to stave off Matt Duchene single-handedly in carrying that puck to the slot with him on his back, and he does it, and he's able to get inside the slot and beat Ottinger from the far side, and it's because Landeskog's at the net front with Esa Lindell taking away Ottinger's eyes. And I just wanted to shout out how that formula isn't so different from the one that rewarded Lehkonen goal with Lehkonen at the net front. There's no secret why it is a formula for success for the Avs. But now we can talk about the officiating. I have a hard time with this because it felt like a hockey play that was obviously being oversold. Because in the replay, you do see that Malinsky's arm does come up a little bit. So I'll give him that. I will. But it's a complete oversell in terms of what kind of reaction Sam Still has to this. It's not so different from Jamie Benn walking into Josh Manson's stick. Sam Still has to essentially walk into Sam Malinsky's elbow to make this happen. And
to my eye, the elbow never touched him in the face, so I want to just make sure that I point that out. From the replays that I watched, you could make the argument a shoulder pad caught him in the chin, but for my money, Megan, I'm sorry, I didn't even see Sam Steele walk into Sam Malinsky's elbow. That's just me.
I'm not sure where he actually contacts Malinsky. There is, I don't know, some contact. And I look back at the Mason Marchment, Cale Makar elbowing call, because people had a lot of issues with this call that went the Avs way. And my memory of watching that replay was that it wasn't really an elbow. It was actually Mason Marchment's stick shaft. And he jabs Cale Makar in the head still pretty violently. And so the intent is still a penalty, though it maybe isn't an elbow in nature. It's still pretty malicious, right? That's where you lose me a little bit with the Malinsky Steele call. It was such a nothing play that was so oversold by Steele. And it obviously got in their heads because it just felt like fortune, fate was not on Colorado's side. And this is where I get frustrated with them too, with the resiliency aspect, is they had been so resilient through this point, but this one clearly got in their head. And things fall apart a little bit on the kill, to your point, but it was also such a highly skilled play. Rantanen, his one-timer was stopped, so they had to recollect it in the corner, and his reset from the circle, he faked like he was going to pass to the point or to the bumper and sent a no-look pass to Matt Duchene instead. And that no-touch pass made it cross-slot to Wyatt Johnston, who was all alone, but it also unfolded so quickly. I don't know that there was much the Avs could have done to defend against it, because it was good deception on behalf of Rantanen. The one-touch pass from Duchene cross-slot unfolded so quickly, not so different from how I'm talking about the formula of success for the Avs. that would have been hard for anyone to kill, to include Mackenzie Blackwood, who like earlier in the game was incredibly strong on the kill for the Avs. This one just felt like it was ending up in the back of the net no matter what.
And like I said, because I agree with you. The I was saying it to Colleen here in the press box. Kivy called him out right away. He said, behind you, and he pointed at him. And Charlie shoulder checked, but didn't really move. And I would have just loved to see someone get a little bit more actively in that lane. Again, that's easy to say when you have an overhead view and you're watching all of it go on and all that. But yeah, and again, I want to go back because we're going to keep talking about the officiating here in this game because I actually think this game got out of control as a result of that. This is not something that I think is in favor of one team or the other. I don't even think it's just this series, Megan. There's inconsistent officiating going on, not only within the series, but within each game. Sorry, what were you going to say about it getting out of control?
Going back to the first period, I watched Mason Marshman and Leon Bichelle grab Jack Drury from under their shoulders
Yes.
and drop him, and it was insane. And they also like football tackled Parker Kelly going to the net for a rebound. And so I have in my notes just a separate line about the fourth line taking a lot of shit in this game. You know, you've got OC eating cross checks to the back to back. And there's just, you know, that's where with the Malinsky and the Steele play, I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to look at that and be told that's just hockey, let them play, that's where you lose me a little bit on the Malinsky call.
I'm with you 100%, and that's my only thing with talking about the officiating, and I thought what Gabe Landeskog said was spot on, that there were some of those calls that it's like, yeah, we see that called in preseason when you're trying to set the precedent for what officials want to blow dead, during the season or not. Not playoff game, 1-goal game type moments. And again, what I'm about to say here is not exclusive to the Avs. The officials in this series have their fingerprints on a lot of big moments throughout this series, and tonight was no different. And so suddenly you go from, all right, it's a 1-goal game with 5:22 left, even at 4-2. You're like, hey, we're in a better situation than we were in at the start of this period. 2 minutes in. Next one finds the back of the net. It's 5-2. You're right back to the 3-goal deficit that you had just chipped away at. And this time it's a tip from Mason Marchman in front. And that, to me, was when it felt like the exclamation point. Mikko Rantanen's in on things. Matt Duchene sets up a goal to Wyatt Johnston. And then Mason Marchman gets the fifth goal. And it was just like, all right, all the players that are kind of the villains in this series have cashed in. And then from there, it felt a little bit just like the Avs were trying to send a message. But I guess what were your thoughts on the way that second period wound down? Or I guess if you have any others, it's pretty cut and dry.
So this is the point in the game between periods where it's decided that Scott Wedgwood is going to lead them out onto the ice for the third. And it's a bit different from Ottinger in that the numbers reflect Blackwood might have had a bit of a tougher night in net comparatively. Expected goals were 242, and at that point he let in 5. And we obviously can account for some pretty weird ones there in the beginning. So I by no means feel that Blackwood lost this game for the Avs. It felt in the same way that I described that power play goal for Wyatt Johnston as one that was just inevitably going in. The Fates had decided it. The Fates had decided this was not Mackenzie Blackwood's game. So I don't want to mistake this for a criticism of Mackenzie Blackwood. It just wasn't quite his night, and the odds were not in anybody's favor. It was still such a goal out of reach, and because there is an elimination game now that we're looking at for Game 6, it is important to have Mackenzie Blackwood rested. But something I've seen come up, not everybody is on this page, but I've seen people critical of the Avs' physicality in this series and feeling that they were too soft on pucks and they got worked off too easily. And my note coming out of the second period was that the hits were 38-20 in favor of Colorado. And 38 hits is about what they ended in Game 4 on the whole. So they had already met their game total in hits through 2 periods of play that they completed entirely in Game 4. And similarly, like, it was 21-8 in favor of Colorado in terms of hits, and 10 of those 21 came from the bottom 6 alone. And so the physicality was ever present from the Avs, not only in this game, but over the course of this series. And I felt the difference between this game compared to the others where they've been good defensively is what they allowed in odd man rushes against. It's a rough average of like 3 odd man rushes per game for the Avs through this point, and they had allowed 5 rush attempts through 2 periods at that point and finished with 8 on the night. And so that was a stark contrast defensively from what they allowed in their rush coverage before. And so there are things that the Avs do well through 2 periods, that they're creating opportunities and they're possessing the puck even when they are a bit undisciplined on the whole. But their defensive game had faltered a little bit. And obviously it gets away from them. You know, in the 3rd period, they're just trying to launch a comeback at that point. But that's going to be one of my biggest takeaways from this game is it definitely wasn't in the Avs' favor, but they also didn't do themselves many favors defensively.
Yeah, Megan, we're going to hear from Jared Bednar here in just a second, and then I want to get into a couple of specifics on players. Do you have any other kind of broad strokes thoughts about this game? The 3rd period was the 3rd period. It played out pretty chalk. The Stars add an empty netter. Any other, like I said, just kind of broad stroke stuff? We're going to get into a couple player specifics here as we begin to wind things down. Anything else before we hear from Jared Bednar?
Yeah, the only other thing is the final power play. You know, it shows signs of life, but this point, because of how the officiating had gotten out of hand, this whole 3rd period was pretty out of hand, to be honest with you. I don't take much of meaning in terms of hockey being played from this 3rd period, but I do want to save space to talk about Scott Wedgwood coming in as relief. So if that's one of the things that we have to talk about after, then we can just talk about it then.
Yeah, we'll get into Wedgwood. I want to talk about Marty Netchis. I want to talk about Sam Malinsky, and we'll just kind of dive into a couple of these more specifics here as we wind down. But let's hear from Jared Bednar after the game. Now that his team is facing elimination, their season is on the line on Thursday. Let's hear from the Avs head coach.
Down 3 is not a position this team's been in a while. Were they a bit stunned at times tonight?
Our team? Yes. Well, it's easy to fall down 3 when we give up those first 2, right? Like a couple strange goals there for sure. The first one, and then the second one lands on his back and goes in. I thought we were playing okay. We definitely needed to get sharper on the defensive side of it early in the game, but we pushed back and created some good chances at the other end. You go down 3, we're fighting hard, we get it within 1, and then didn't love that penalty call in that game, especially the way the game was going. So then it kind of gets out of reach for us, right?
Jesse, then Corey.
Coach, on those penalty calls there, you guys get it back within 1. It felt like your team was building momentum. And then a couple calls, you know, Gabe was saying that those felt maybe like preseason calls. I just wonder what your thoughts were.
Yeah. I mean, you got to play the game that's, you know, the way it is. And so, like, we made some mistakes. I just don't love, like, that puck's getting passed to the slot and Sam's in a position where he's got to, like, play the guy and he tries to jump by him. It's a tough call when you're looking at some of the physicality that's going on at and away from the puck on this to get that interference call.
I know this kind of yo-yos back and forth in a series, but this morning Pete sort of called out, challenged some of his big guys. Obviously, they all had a big game.
Yeah.
Is there a similar message coming before Game 6?
Oh, we'll see. That's between me and them.
Ollie?
What are the positives that you took out of the game?
Well, I mean, it's tough to look at those right now because we lost the game. It's a big game, right? And there's, like, we weren't great. We weren't great on the defensive side of things. Like, some decision making, and just, like, I thought first period just not sharp enough on the defensive side of things, right? But again, a couple strange goals in there that you're trying to dig out from. So you got to there has to be an element of risk in your game after that. So, but I think there's still some good things that we did on the offensive side of things, and we got to get back to that game we played the other night. And so they took care of their home ice, and now we got to go take care of ours.
Evan and Corey.
After some of the other losses, you've mentioned some guys that have been too quiet in these games. You've got 5 games now where you got a lot of important guys that have not found the back of the net. Is there a concern, or what is kind of the message moving forward?
Yeah, you're always concerned this time of year. You can't have guys having bad nights this time of the year. Like I said, like you've heard me say it all along, it's going to come down to playing good teams that finish in the similar spot in the standings as you. You got to go play your best hockey for 2 weeks in order to win, right? So if you've got good players having bad nights, it's not your best hockey. You're firing on all cylinders the other night, like Game 3 and Game 4, and things start to look a lot better.
This is the first adversity of Mackenzie Blackwood's playoff career. Just what did you think of him tonight, and what do you see with him going forward?
Well, tough game for him, I thought. Obviously to let that first one in, the second one lands on his back and goes in. He makes a couple big saves in there, no question. But like it wasn't he's part of the same. I'd group him together with some a significant amount of our team tonight.
Last two, go ahead, John, then Justin. Is it a situation where you can almost, because of all of the outliers, you can treat the game as an outlier and point to the trajectory of how the series was going? Or, it just felt like this was off the grid.
A little strange, but I don't think it matters. Like you're trying to reset after a win to keep looking at the things that you're doing well and to continue to do those and gain an advantage in the series. And the things that you're doing poorly, you're looking at those twice as hard to make sure you're sharp in all the right areas in order to defend the other team. So we did that this morning, coming in after a big win. We'll do it again after a bad loss.
You mentioned, not being sharp enough defensively early. How would you assess Cale's play in this series to this point?
Well, I think he had a little bit of a rough start to the series, but he was absolutely outstanding at home. So, yeah, and we've had a few guys that have struggled in this building and play good at home. That's a bright spot going back to our building.
All right, so there we go. Let's start with Wedgwood Meghan. He does talk about it there, wanting to get Mackenzie Blackwood some rest. I guess just what did you want to unpack about Wedgwood? Came in, I thought he looked good.
Yeah, he had to shut Hintz down on the breakaway and had to weather a penalty kill or two, and he was strong in relief. I think that's a really hard ask of a goaltender coming in cold in a playoff hockey environment, and it's not so different from what we saw when he came in as relief in the debilitating Buffalo game, and I was just really impressed, and I wanted to give him his flowers because that's not going to be a storyline that really stands out from this game. The biggest is, of course, the loss.
Megan, I've seen some chatter, and I don't necessarily think this dialogue is fair about, Mikko versus Necas. Marty Necas does pick up a couple points tonight, but Megan, right now, this, especially within this series, this just looks like hockey that Marty Necas is not built for. What have been your thoughts on him? He's just a guy that on a night like tonight, I feel like the Avs could have really used a lot more out of.
It's tough because the thing that's missing from him is what separates him from just being a good NHL player. Like if he was expected to be on a third line for the Avs right now, the way that he's playing hockey is satisfactory. He is doing things to create on the power play. He's going for the one-timer 5v5, and he's throwing the body around in a way that you might not have expected Marty Necas to. And he's gotten some guys, he's knocked them over as a result of it. I think that he poses more of a physical threat than he lets on, but not being able to convert the high skill part of his game to meaningful offense is hurting this team, because the top 9 for Colorado has created 10 goals, but 5 of them are Nathan MacKinnon's. Tonight, with Wyatt Johnston and Mikko Rantanen getting their first goals of the series, Mason Marchment also included in that, Dallas's top 9 also has 10 goals, but it's distributed throughout its top 9. And that's where you see that you take Nathan MacKinnon out of the top 9 equation, and you've got a lot of players that are underperforming as a result. And that's where it becomes difficult. You know, Netchis, he needs to be more of an offensive impact because that is his strength as a player, and it's why he's here. It's to help replace a Mikko Rantanen-sized hole. And I think side by side, Mikko Rantanen has also been underwhelming for the Dallas Stars. You know, going into tonight and even following it, their stats have been almost identical in terms of contributions. And so now you've got Mikko Rantanen, his first goal in the series, a goal and 3 assists, and Marty Netchis with 3 assists coming away from this game. He's just 1 goal away then from being talked about in a similar way as Mikko Rantanen. So I don't think the side-by-side comparison really does any player any favors, but it's still separately. You remove Rantanen from that conversation, it's still not good enough for him to be playing in a top 6 role, oftentimes top line minutes, top unit power play opportunity, and not finding a way to impact the game offensively.
On the back end, Sam Malinsky, Megan, are you playing him in Game 6?
Here's what's tough. I do think I'd understand it completely if he wasn't playing. But I don't know that it improves the goal scoring challenge that Dallas proves to be. Like, that's been the toughest part of this series. I think that on the whole, the team defense and the defensive details have been pretty good, all things considered. I was a little let down tonight with the odd man rushes allowed, but you look at the overall physical game and trying to be strong in battles, and there are a couple, you know, miscues coming out of their own end. So like blue line to blue line, exits and entries is where I think they did get stumped a little bit, but you see the pucks to the net that Malinsky provides. And I'm worried to take that away with players like Kent McCarr and Devon Taves not also playing quite like what you'd like to see for a top pairing. And because so much of the offense runs through the back end, I'm a little scared to remove an offensive weapon from the back end in that case.
Well, and with the way that Jake Ottinger's playing, I think you need as many guys putting heavy, hard shots to the net as possible. Here's what it is, Megan. The Avs got to go out and win 2 games in a row. They are highly capable of doing that. And actually, let me stop right there. They don't have to go out and win 2 games in a row. They got to win a game. You got to win a game and keep this series alive on Thursday. And then you got to go from there. You got to find a way to get this series back to Dallas and try to take a game out of here on the road. Look, vibes are down in Avs land here tonight. The locker room was upset. Locker room was quiet. Jared Bednar, you could tell. That one stings. I can tell just by looking at the chat. People are upset. People are upset on Twitter. But the Avs still have an opportunity here to come back home and get a win and then see what happens from there. They have a chance to do a couple things here that this core has struggled to do. They have a chance to win a series in 7, which they haven't been able to do. They've got a chance to knock off Pete DeBoer, which they haven't been able to do. And they got a chance to prove some people wrong in a year where this roster was loaded up, built for a deep run. It's unfortunate they ran into another top 5 team in the NHL in round 1, but those are the way that the chips fall. I guess, what are your thoughts heading into Thursday? 2 days off here for the Avs to really collect their thoughts and make sure they're in the right headspace.
Yeah, you know, to the eye test, there are definitely some blights in this game. Kind of starting at the end of the second period into the third period, where it did feel like the Avs lost a lot of their confidence. But analytically coming away from this game, they outshoot, they outshot attempt, they out high danger chance, they out-possess, they out-hit Dallas in every arena. And so for this to be a 6-2 final is a tough pill to swallow. And that's where more than anything, the Avs need to be mentally tough because they still have a process that is a hard time for the Dallas Stars. There's some weird things that happen inside this game that they need to have a short-term memory about because it was fluky and weird, and from a statistics standpoint, not all of those things are likely to happen in another game setting. It was very weird that they all happened tonight. So they need to be more resilient than they were. Not just in game, but going into the game. They really need to focus on what it means to be mentally tough. You've got a teammate in Gabriel Landeskog who has just endured the most challenging obstacle that any person might ever face. And he went against all odds in coming back from an injury in an unprecedented fashion that nobody was expecting. I think having that example right in front of your face of somebody defying the odds and being resilient and being mentally tough, it's kind of insulting not to rise to that and to be inspired by that. And so there's a lot of things the Avs have done well in this series that have been stronger than the Dallas Stars. And there are players who have not played to their expectation yet. So Game 6 is a perfect time for those players to show up.
I'm with you. The Avs got to figure it out here. You know, you got to win 4. Dallas has only won 3. The Avs have a chance here to still come out of this series. But, yeah, like you said, you got to prove how mentally tough you are. And, look, if you're going to win a Stanley Cup, you have to be able to overcome adversity in these moments. When the Avs won 3 years ago, it was a little bit of an easy run for them. You have to go through these moments, and I think if the Avs approach it with that attitude of, hey, we have an opportunity here, they're going to give themselves a great chance to win come Thursday. So we'll hear from them tomorrow at the airport. But then other than that, it's a day off, and this is it, Megan. This is what it's all about. You get a chance to come out on Thursday and do something to put yourself in a position to win, and then you get a chance to do something special and prove to everyone that you are for real. If not, it's going to be a long summer, and it's going to be a summer that is maybe uneasy for Avalanche fans as you maybe start looking around. And I said on Twitter, I still think some of this would be surprising. But it wouldn't be completely out of the question if guys like Chris McFarland or Jared Bednar start having their names, circled around as in terms of being in the hot seat. We can talk about that if and when they are eliminated from this series. Like I said, I still would find it surprising to see if they chose to make giant sweeping changes, but they've got to find a way here to bring this series back to Dallas on Thursday. Any other thoughts for tonight, Megan?
No.
That's going to do it. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. We got Mark here with me. Make sure you guys can see us and hear us. Avs have a chance. They got a chance on Thursday to extend this series, but Dallas takes this one tonight. They head to Denver with a chance to close the series out. Avs fighting for their lives here on Thursday in Game 6. We'll see what happens. Look, this is what the playoffs are all about. This is fun. Your backs are against the wall, and you got to go out and prove that you're a team that can get it done. So another late one here for us, getting out of the arena after 1 a.m. But like I said, she's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. This is what playoffs are all about. Let's have some fun with it this week, see what the Avs can do on Thursday. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Have a good one.